Okay, this is the infamous WALTS worm. And we have caught hundreds and hundreds of fish on this basic, simple little fly. And all it is just a, as you can see, it's just a dubbed body with a wire rib going through it. And that is it. That's all it is. So the whole appeal with this fly is that it's so simple, and there's so many different types of dubbing that will work for this thing that you know, you can fill a box of this fly pretty quick. And like I said in last videos, I mean, they're semi-disposable. So really good fly to have on hand. So this particular one is tied on a fire hole 551 in a size 12, and it's matched with a tungsten bead, slotted tungsten bead in a 1/8 size. So that's just for this particular one. You know, you don't have to follow that real strictly. I mean, you can sort of put a bigger bead on this hook, smaller bead, and you can time smaller, bigger, whatever you want to do. So point being is that these are just suggested templates, so you don't have to follow this real meticulously. So this, again, this is that fire hole 551. It's a nice hook. It's a shorter shank with a wider gap, and it's barbless. So works out good for these worm type patterns, just because they're not quite as long as those mayfly nymphs. You know, they're a little stubbier, curved. So it's just a good shape that matches the natural. So, and then this fly does imitate, you know, mainly a caddis larva or like a rockworm or something like that. So that's a good hook to use. Other hooks that would certainly work is this one here. This is the Umpqua C450 in a 12. Very similar hook. It looks like the gap on this one's a touch wider, and it's also a little bit shinier than this one, like a nickel finish on this one. So that would work just fine. Another one that's popular is the Arex 551. It's like a mini jig, but same idea with all three of these hooks. They're just a little short shank, wide gap jig hook. So that works fine there. And then on this particular fly, I've got the lead wire is a .015. So it's relatively thin. You could certainly use thicker lead, but when you're working with flies this small, you know, if you use lead that is too thick, it's hard to get your thread transitioned smoothly. So the thinner lead is just easier to work with and just ends up working out better. So, and let's see, the body, the entire body is just dubbing. So it's on this one, I've used this hairline dubbing in olive, and this is, I think, what made hairline kind of famous. This is what they started with, was this particular blend. But as you can see, it's just it's a mixture. I don't know if you can see this real well, but it's a mixture of different types of hair from a rabbit. So some of the longer, stiffer hairs, the guard hairs, are found sort of on their ear, you know, their upper ear. You got a lot of these stiffer, longer hairs up there, and kind of on their feet as well. But it's a blend of those mixed with this really soft, fluffy kind of body insulatory hair. So so they mix these, they shave these rabbits, mix this stuff up and come up with these blends. And this one's really good for the WALTS, because you have that mixture of that soft stuff, and then you'll get some of those spiky hairs that kind of poke out in between the rib. So it gives it a really buggy look. But again, you can use a lot of different types of dubbing. So another one that's popular is this Hare's Ear Plus, and it's got some synthetic fibers mixed in. Not sure what kind, but it just gives it a little bit of a different sheen in the water. This one's the gold. I really like the gold for this fly. Here's one that's dark olive. So it might be hard to see for you, but it's a little bit different looking. Just gives it a little bit of a shine to it. So here's another one, dark brown. All good. All would work just fine for this fly. It doesn't really matter. And then these, you know, these nymphs, it's not like a streamer where if you with the streamer stuff, it's helpful to follow the recipes as close as you can, because those flies are swimming. You know, you're looking for particular types of movement in the water. And if you substitute stuff, get the proportions wrong, the hook sizes, the weights, the keeling, the balancing, if you get that stuff wrong, the fly will probably still work okay, but it won't work as well as the person who designed it says it should. So, but these nymphs are different. These nymphs are just being tumbled through, and you're just going for a rough silhouette, shape, color. That's really it. So, like I said, you can get away with a lot of different types of dubbing. Hair's Ear Plus is good. Crystal dub is another one. This one is, you don't get as many of those guard hairs, those stiffer ones in here. It's a lot softer, more of the body stuff, mixed with some flash. This is totally fine, totally fine. And then another one that's quite popular is the Hair's Ice. And so this is basically this original one, but they mix in some really, really fine, essentially ice dub. So it's real flashy, good for like dirtier water, sunnier day type situation. Really good stuff there. So I'm grabbing a bunch of olive stuff. This waltz worm is also done in like the natural hair stuff. So just like the tan, just a natural rabbit color. Olive's been great for us, natural's been good. But olive's certainly been probably our most productive. So, so that is that. So the thread on this one is just a 6/0 olive uni. You could use any really 6/0 on this, it works fine. And then one thing to think about too is the brighter stuff from Vivas. This is the chartreuse or like canary yellow. You could tie this whole fly in this, and when you finish it up front with your whip finish, you'll end up with a nice bright hot spot. So just another option for you. So so we'll get started on this one. I got my bead on here already. And then for the rib, it's just some wire. Cut this to get it ready, but it's just a small copper wire. You can use gold, you can use olive, you can use silver. Doesn't really matter. So first thing is to get our lead going, and we're just gonna do about 12 wraps of this. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you can spin this off and spin the back off. So yeah, much easier to use that thin stuff. If you were to use the thicker wire, it's just harder to smooth it out with your thread and get it up in that bead. So with that smaller lead, you can see it just slides right up in there. So nice and clean, nice and simple. And with your thread, you can start it right behind that lead, and then build this up so you're forming like a ramp. Just smooth everything out. Get this tag out. And then you can run to the bead, put your rib wire in there, and then wrap it all the way through the bend until you're about right there. So with the worm type stuff, you can go pretty far down into the bend because those worms are longer, they're sort of curved most of the time when they're drifting. Those mayflies are typically pretty straight. So that's where this hook style comes into play. With that wider gap, you can sort of use all that stuff, and it's not gonna close, not gonna close that hook gap so much because it's so wide. You can work well into that bend. So get this smoothed out, and then you can start with your dubbing. And I'm just gonna use the hairline dubbing in an olive. And I typically don't use like wax so much. So with this fly, some people will do a dubbing loop, you know? They'll fold their thread in half, tie it in, and then put their dubbing in this loop, spin it like they're making a little piece of chenille. I don't spend that much time on these things. I just will noodle this right onto the thread. And I personally don't really use a lot of wax. I will if we're doing like a dubbing loop, but when you're just noodling it on here like this, it is easier without the wax because you can slide this dubbing up and down this thread like this. If you were to use wax and you get the wax in your thread, then spin your dubbing on there, you're sort of locked in. So I just spin it nice and tight without the wax, and it works fine. So I'm gonna get this going. You're gonna look for about 5 to 6 inches of dubbing on here, not much at all, but just make sure it's nice and smooth. You don't want any like lumps in here. So that should be it right there. And then we're just gonna wrap this all the way to the bead. Nice and tight, and we're going for that worm shape, which is essentially just a tube. So just work your way forward here and give it a few extra turns kind of right behind the bead. And if you have too much dubbing, just pull it off. Okay, so that's sort of a rough shape there. See how buggy, real picky looking. And then our rib is just gonna come through here about 8 to 10 times, evenly spaced. Remember that these flies are designed to be simple, way simple. So rib right behind the bead, go behind in front, behind in front. That's good, clip that out, and then whip it. 2 whip finishes. Okay, done. And then you could definitely put a little spot of super glue or head cement or UV stuff right there on top. Or use, well, after that you could use a bodkin like this or a brush, but you're definitely gonna wanna come in here and raise a lot of those guard hairs that they mix in. In between these wires, you can sort of lift it out with the bodkin, or a brush is definitely faster than this. I don't have a brush with me, but just point being is you want to kind of lift and pull out a lot of those stiffer hairs to give it a buggier kind of look. Boy, I wish I had a brush with me now. Anyway, you get the idea. But just come through here and lift all this stuff out. And then one thing that I like is if you end up with a lot of these really long hairs, the stiffer ones, you can take your scissors and just sort of trim it a little bit. I mean, they don't need to be super long like that. But as long as they're exposed and out, it makes it look a lot more enticing. So, so that's it. I mean, that's the Waltz worm. We've caught so many fish on this silly little thing. And like I said, you can tie it in a bunch of different sizes, different colors, different beads, but this thing's been amazing for us. So tie some of these up, let us know what you think. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, it helps us out. Thanks a lot, appreciate it.